It's the calm before the storm.
Yes, Ross and I go way back, and we're going to, how far back do we go? Pretty good. I mean, we're only 22, so yeah, 90 something. Those were good years. And we'll do this from time to time. We forget you're here. Anyway, I wanted to point something out before we get going this morning. Just thinking about, how we set the table. And I don't know if you've kind of been, during the reading of God's word through Lamentations, the timing of that with everything that's happening in our world right now, especially in Israel, to me is just mind-boggling the way God works. Just like I said a couple weeks ago, we kind of had punted this series around a couple of times, just like weren't quite ready for it, if you will. And finally, when it came down to it, it was like, yeah, now's the time. And then to see just kind of what's been going on in the world, can I just thank you with a big measure of humility. This is probably one of the more profound setting the table updates that I can give you, especially in light of how we've been reading God's word, just kind of liturgically, in light of what is happening in Israel. We partner, I don't know if you know this, but a strong percentage of our mission allocation goes to the gospel in Israel. We just have a belief that, God gave us the word through these people and our Savior through these people, and we just have a passion to partner with Israel because of those things. And we actually we were able to, thank you because of your generosity and your obedience to the Lord and your giving. We were able to send an extra gift here not long ago. We found out on the ground that there was a couple of situations that were going on. There was about 100 troops that had to go through and clear out an area. And they needed a couple of things. They needed wristwatches because they couldn't wear their smartwatches because of location detection. And this is the one, though, that really got me, is after they had finished clearing out that area, none of those soldiers would wear those boots again because of the things that they had to walk through and step on and step over. And so your giving, church, enabled us as a church to make a small difference, but to help sow into providing some new boots for those soldiers on the ground. So thank you so much for how you set the table day in and day out through your obedience and generosity. Can we just thank the Lord that we get to be a part of how he moves and he works? All right, Ross. I don't want to take up too much time because if you don't know Ross has been a good friend to Kelly and me for years and years and years. We were fortunate enough to be able to serve together. He was actually legit an Aggie. Any Aggies in the room? He was legit. I just pretended for about 2 years. No one knew the difference. But we led worship together at a Bible study over there called Breakaway for a few years.
Ever heard of it?
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever heard of that. But we got to be a part of that together and caused a lot of mischief in the meantime. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, we both were fired probably 12 times at least each. But it was good times. And Ross, I've had the privilege to walk with and watch him over the years and see his ministry and be impacted by his ministry. In fact, I was introducing some of his music to Kyle even yesterday because he was asking questions and just going back and listening to some songs, man, I couldn't help but get choked up and just God's anointing on Ross's life. Well, when we started talking about this series, I thought, man, what an incredible time to be able to bring Ross in and let him tell part of his story as a way to wrap this series up. Because I think, we talked about a lot of things. We started this thing with saying that the origin of suffering is that original sin, hopefully giving us a baseline to be able to give some answers to ourselves when we face hardship, when we face suffering, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so, so that we're a little less quick to shake our fist at the sky or yell at God for being so mean, or we can say, hey, listen, this is not God just, being this cosmic killjoy coming after me because of some sin that maybe I committed last night or yesterday or last week. But no. This is a fruit of the fall. It's a product of the brokenness at original sin, Genesis 3:7. And so that was a very important foundation that we laid. And of course, we went into some other things. It's not necessarily God's fault, but the fruit of the fall. Talking about situational things, depression, loss and grief. And I know Pastor Aaron did such a great job with fear and anxiety. Last week, we got to hear from Emily right here from our own house, a psychologist, and just hear some things about mental health that hopefully that was helpful and somewhat encouraging to us to help just kind of to think biblically as well as we think on things like mental health. But Ross, I feel like your story kind of captures a lot of those things, if not a lot of those things that we've been talking about.
Yeah. So before I dive in, I want to say one thing about the reading of Lamentations, which I think is so cool because churches typically don't read a lot of scripture, in just together like that. But for sure, they don't read something as outright depressing as that book. And
welcome to the Declaration.
Yeah. No, but I love it because something that I think. People don't realize about the idea of lament is that its purpose, it's a twofold purpose. It's one, it's to say, when we say this stuff out loud, people are like, oh, somebody else feels that stuff, But you also say it out loud so that those who don't feel that are reminded that that's in our midst, right? Because the gathering church isn't just, we don't gather just to hear sermons, we don't gather just to sing songs together, we gather to actually share our faith, right? Like I know we've heard that phrase, if you've grown up in church, you heard share faith, and that usually means tell somebody how to go to heaven, right? But really what we're doing here is sharing our faith. We get in this room and they read that verse, that pile of verses, and somebody in here is deeply resonating with that pain. And we can say, whoever that is, I'd like to share my faith with them, right? Or somebody in here has been through something as awful as that, and they've come through it on the other side. Oh man, I'd love to share some faith with that person. So part of what I want to do today is just kind of share a bit of my story so that we hear this lament, but also sort of a third reason why we do the lament is you heard toward the middle of that passage, that the writer is saying, I know you're great, God. I know you're worthy of my praise. I know you're victorious. So prove that again, right? And so that's kind of what I want to do is I'll walk you through my story, singing a couple songs, and just kind of tell you how sort of the Lord took me through some difficult times. So basically, my story starts with, in 2000, this story starts with in 2012, my dad was fishing down at the coast, not far from here, and he drowned. And there's our picture. Yeah, so that was my dad the last day. That's the last picture that we had of him. And he was out at the coast, and the day after this picture was taken, he drowned. And so I was actually in Texas still, living in Bryan. And my brother and my dad were out doing that with some friends. And so I was actually packing up to leave to go to Nashville the next morning. I would, at the time, take 5-day trips to Nashville to do songwriting stuff because I was signed to a pub deal, and I just would go and do that. I literally signed my pub deal like I think officially like 3 weeks before this. But anyway, so I'm packing up. My wife and I, we would do these like Sunday night. Ross is about.
By the way, hang on. A pub is not a bar. It's a publishing deal.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
songwriting.
Yeah,
You're
sorry.
not in Nashville.
Publishing deal. Right. Sorry, I'm going to speak a bunch of Nashville cool language. Anyway.
You're so cool.
No. So my wife and I would do this thing on Sunday nights if I was going to fly out the next day for a trip where we would have like a date at home. We'd get some chips and salsa and we'd hang out, whatever. And so we were doing that, and my brother I got a call from my brother at 10:30 at night. That's not good. I answer the phone. My brother says, Dad has drowned. My parents were living in the same town, so he said, you need to go over to Mom's house and tell her, that Dad's drowned. We can't call her. So I get in the car. I go over to her house, knock on her door at 11 o'clock at night. That's never good. She opens the door. That sort of starts this thing. So for whatever reason, this isn't true for all of us who've had these kind of mental health struggles, but for whatever reason, that was kind of an on-ramp for me for depression. And I want to be careful because grief and depression aren't the same thing, and they're not always tied together. But for me, there was this kind of 3 or 4 part cocktail of I turned 40 in February of that year. I had signed my publishing deal, thought my life was going to be, you remember that? You think your life's going to be different because you signed a publishing deal. And then my dad drowns, and at the same time, my brother was in the midst of a divorce that got really bad. So it's like a bunch of stuff kind of happening at one time, our family kind of falling apart, and I just got depressed. So I remember that there was this one day in the car, maybe 3 to 6 months after my dad passed. My dad has three brothers, and they were all really successful and very wonderful people. And so when my dad died, they would call me and check on me and say, "Hey, what does your mom need?" Because my mom she was angry and hurt, and she didn't want to talk to them, So they would call me and say, "What can we do for your mom?" So this one day, I was in the car with my wife, and one of my uncles calls, and it's a wonderfully nice phone call. He says, "What can we do for your mom?" I think something was going on with her house, and he was trying to say, "Do we need to give her some money?" And so we're talking through that. Nothing negative about the call whatsoever. I hang up the phone, and I started crying. And my wife, Stacy, says, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't want to be in the middle of all this stuff, and I don't know how to manage all the people and the feelings." And I just felt so heavy, literally physically, like I was heavy. And she said, "Ross, I don't know that you've had time to grieve your dad because you are grieving the death of the life that you thought that you would have, And I mention this because that was such a moment for me. And this is not necessarily related to depression or mental health as much as everybody in this room experiences something like this fairly regularly. And it might feel minor to other people, it might feel minor to you, but we are experiencing little deaths of the life that we wanted all the time. Sometimes it's some major stuff, right? And the difficulty of this is that, a death of a person, awful as it is, there's funerals, there's people bring you food, there's sort of a process of grieving that everyone expects, right? If a marriage ends, as awful as that is, there's a divorce proceeding, there's various systems in place, It's all really hard, but there's things in place, right? If you lose a job, there can be severance pay or unemployment or whatever, right? When this death of a life thing happens, no one knows it's happening, maybe not even you. So there's no system in place. And oftentimes you need to grieve it. And you don't know how. No one's even told you how. And so even if the rest of this thing that we talk about today goes past you or doesn't apply to you, I want to just urge you, as you leave today, as you have time to process today, ask your own soul. We did our first 2 songs, you and I've noticed this, but they were us speaking to our souls, which is a whole other thing. That's David taught us that. But I want you to go home and kind of speak to your own soul and say, is there something down here that I need to grieve? Because if you don't, it's going to get worked out, one way or the other, but it's way better if we sort of volunteer ourselves into that grieving. Is there a death? Is there something I hoped would happen with my life that hasn't? Is there something I never thought would happen that has? Is there something I've lost that I really, really thought I would get back that's never come back? Is there some broken, wounded thing that I got to work out? You may just need to take a literal day, and just grieve it. Just go for a walk, just go for a drive, just go do something that allows you to grieve that. Maybe tell someone in your life, that guy was talking at a church, and this thing in me is died. And I'm so sad, and I've never even talked about it. So if nothing else, let's just start there, that many of you just need to work through the death of the life that you thought you would have. So when this happened for me, and I realized, okay, I think I'm depressed, because I just started being off. I'm sure you guys have talked about this a lot, even, with the past week, with the more kind of science-y week, like something just feels off, like I was different, I mean, if I'm just honest, I was not a very good father. We have 4 kids. I was not a very good father for these 4 or 5 years that I was depressed. I was not a very good husband. I was on pastoral staff at a church a little bit smaller than this, and I was ignoring all the phone calls, which you're not supposed to do when you're on pastoral staff. And I was just bad. I was a bad friend. But the one thing that kind of felt like I was good at in new ways was writing songs. This is my job. And I don't say that to like make light of it. Hey, if you want to be a good songwriter, just get depressed. That's not what I would say, okay? But for me, I had learned this craft of writing songs. And one of the features of depression for many people and for me is a sort of numbness. And so you're trying to access feelings and you just can't, right? And so this is so strange, right? But I praise God, a lot for this, that I was able to say, I know what joy feels like in a song. I'm going to write a joyful song and try to get my emotions to go there. I know what sadness feels like in a song. I know how to write a sad song. I'm going to do that and see if I can get my emotions to follow. So it was almost like my heart was this plane up in the air. It was slowly running out of fuel, and I by writing songs I was able to kind of like get a tractor out and plow out a field and say land here, And so that's what I did. I started writing songs, and so as I started sharing those songs in churches and in doing my whatever gigs that I was doing, I quickly realized something. This has been 10 years now. I quickly realized something, that at least at that time, the church was not really talking about this, And I think we're getting a lot better at that, but we weren't really talking about it. And so I'd get up and I'd say, this song's about my depression, and I'd sing it, and people would come up to me afterwards and they'd say, I'm depressed too. Like, they didn't want to say it out loud, and thank you for talking about it. And I was at the time a part of a very like sort of misfits and burnouts church. So I kind of forgotten that the normal culture was not doing this, And then I noticed that the broader culture really was doing it. Like every TV show had a subplot about mental health, and all the pop songs were talking about it, and whole movies about it, and whole ad campaigns. It's everywhere, And we were the last. The church was the last, right? And so what I realized was, the church, Christians aren't good at talking about this, and why, right? I just kind of started asking why, what, and I don't know, John, at any time, John might just chime in, but they know the whole why is. I think there's a lot of whys. There's a lot of reasons why. I think one is that we don't know what the terms mean most of the time. Like we hear these terms and people use them, they overuse them. At this point, they're overusing them. And so we hear these words, depression, anxiety, trauma, whatever, and we hear about people talking about medication and different kinds of therapy, and we're just, trigger. We hear words like trigger and all that, and we think, what does these words really mean? And so I think part of it is we're afraid to sort of co-opt these words that the world uses, so that because we don't want to sound too psychobabbly or whatever, right? And I think we also know that when we get into those conversations, it's sort of like we're stepping out of you should pray about that and read the Bible. We're getting out of that, and people get nervous about that because suddenly we're saying maybe there's more that you might have to do to get through this. But all those reasons, I think, pale in comparison to the main one, and that's shame. And I think shame is the primary reason why we aren't talking about this. When I was depressed, I would look in the mirror and say out loud, why aren't you better? I would be in my closet getting ready. When we moved to Nashville, John will get this. We moved to Nashville and I was 43, and everyone in town at least seemed 25.
Or pretended to be 25.
Yeah, oh yeah. And so they all dressed so cool. And so I'd go into my closet in the mornings if I had like a co-write with somebody cool, and I would think, how cool are they? How young are they? What kind of shoes should I wear for this meeting? I would literally do that. And I remember being in that closet, kind of looking for my shoes or whatever, and I would say out loud, you brought your whole family to Nashville. This is not working. What are you doing? I would out loud say those things. And that, I get emotional thinking about it because that felt like demonic, like I was, and I don't get into a ton of that, but I'm just saying I felt like whatever the origins of these kinds of mental illnesses are, the enemy loves them, and is really good at having fun with them. And so I would stand in that closet and I'd say these really, really shameful things. Anyway, I started to just dive in and try to write songs about this, right? And so one of the main themes I kept seeing in the scripture with regard to shame was this idea of fix me, but don't make me deal with you. Okay, and this was basically, so I'd written some lyrics. I do this thing where I will write lyrics that I'm not sure where they're going to go. I like lyrics and I'll work on them. And so I'd written some lyrics about Zacchaeus, who, if you've been to church at all, you know we wrote this mean kind of height-shaming song about this guy, and just because, you know, it's horrible. And it's all
wee little man.
Yeah, he's a wee little man. He's sort of an Irish sort of a song. Anyway, that was terrible. Anyway, but no, this guy's story, he ends up like giving all the money back, and, you know, times like 4 or 5, but still all we remember is that he was tiny, you know. So anyway, but there's this story of this guy Zacchaeus who knows Jesus is going to come by, and so he hides up in a tree. You know, it's like, oh, and Jesus comes by. I think he's thinking, when Jesus comes by, maybe I'll glean something. Maybe I'll see what the hype's about. Maybe I'll get fixed. I feel something, right? And then I was writing these lyrics about him, and I also wrote some lyrics that same day about this woman in Mark chapter 5. Mark 5, if you just want to have like the most like compact, awesome Jesus chapter ever, just read Mark 5. Starts with this guy Jairus coming to Jesus and saying, my daughter's very sick, she's going to die, can you heal her? Jesus is like, sure. He walks across some section of town, and while he's going across town to get to Jairus' house, this woman, she's got she's bleeding, she can't stop bleeding inside, and she's ashamed because of, there's a long story there, but she's a social kind of a pariah. She no one likes her, everyone's afraid of her, whatever, and she sneaks up behind Jesus, and she thinks, if I just touch his clothes, I'll get healed, right? And so she does it. She sneaks up behind him, touches his clothes, runs off, he goes and finds her, right? And I'd written these lyrics about these two people, and I was like, and they'd just been sitting there on my desktop, a little thumbnail. And one day I was in the midst of my depression, in the midst of my shame. Ross, why aren't you better? Ross, why'd you drag your family to Nashville? You're going to ruin the whole thing. And I saw that little thumbnail, and I clicked it, and I read it, and I started crying, and I was like, these people felt shame, and they thought, if I can get Jesus to just do something to me, I'll get better, but I definitely don't want to deal with him. I'll touch his clothes and run away. I'll get up in a tree. He'll walk by. Maybe something will change. And I just thought, this is me. I so badly need the Lord to come and do something, but I do not want to talk to him about it. I just want to get fixed, you know? And I'm going to play you a song, but one of the... Whoa, they think I'm tall. It's because I'm just present as very tall. One of the most mysterious to me ways that the Lord is described in the Old Testament is the lifter of our head. And I never understood that when I was a kid. You know, I never got it. And I always joke that when I'd see that phrase, I don't know why, but I would picture the Lion King, and it was just like God's holding a head. I know it's too weird, like lifting up a head, you know. I know that's so dark. It's just my brain. But I was like, what? And I never like got it, right? And then so now, you know, I have four children, and they're all too old for this now. But when my kids were young, if they were feeling shame, they would come toward me or my wife, and their head would be down low. And I would get down like this, put my hand underneath their chin, and I'd lift their head up. I'd say, look at me. I love you. You did something wrong. I love you. We're going to make this right. That's what the Lord wants to do. Am I on here? I guess I'm on. I don't know. All right. We good? Yeah. So that moment, you know, was big for me of seeing those lyrics. And so I wanted to write something about my shame. There's something heavy, I've been dragging it around behind me. With every labored step and movement, it reminds me I cannot escape, and I want to give up. Give in, pretend this cell I'm in is freedom. Oh, keep my head down, don't give you a reason to look my way. 'Cause I'm too ashamed to meet your eyes, to speak your name. I'm scared that I'll be held in chains, bound in lies forever. And I long to hear a sound like something metal being shattered. Oh, shame is a chain, love is a hammer. Some days I want to find you in a crowd and sneak up right behind you. Maybe touch your clothes and steal some power from you and sneak away again. And some days I'd rather hide out in a tree that you are walking under. Oh, and pray that you don't say you're coming over. I don't want to let you in. Oh, but you don't wait to be invited. You're kicking down my door with violent mercy and completely taking over. And I swear I hear a sound like something metal being shattered. Oh, shame is a chain, love is a hammer. Oh, please be careful. The man beneath these chains is frail and fragile. And I've worn them for so long that they feel natural. And the truth is I'm afraid. But if anyone can understand, it's you. 'Cause on your feet and hands the proof of what you did and how you suffered. When the nails went in, the sound of sin forever being shattered. Oh, shame is a chain, love is a hammer. Oh, shame is a chain, love is a hammer.
Good stuff. It's great. So something we will talk around here a lot about is when experience doesn't match expectation, then what, right? And
right.
I think that's kind of what you were getting to is, you know, I had an expectation, maybe unspoken, maybe even not even fully realized, but maybe it was the dream in my head or, you know, and it didn't play out the way that you thought it would. And then you find yourself in this place. And
yeah, because, you know, we say the word disappointment. It doesn't sound like a very dramatic word, but compounded disappointment over time. That's deep erosion of faith. And you can, one of the, I don't know how many of you were like raised in like, you know, churches, but growing up, you know, we always hear testimony on Sunday night, you know, and it'd be somebody with a really dramatic one, and they'd have a really, really dramatic story about being in a biker gang and robbing banks and stuff. And
did you? Was that you?
it's my dad, okay?
Yeah.
No. So, but I think it teaches us that if you don't have something really hard to talk about, you don't have any right to be this broken, you know. Yeah. And man, I just reject that in Jesus' name. That you might have an unexplainable, unrelatable reason why you're miserable and struggling, and the Lord wants to release you. Yes, from that, but first from the shame of it.
Well,
yeah,
if
go ahead.
I can too. I don't want us to fly by this because I do think that there's something to this that you and I even talked about this a little bit beforehand. We didn't realize we were talking about it, but this idea of the death of the life that you thought you would have, right? And I don't know if that hit you guys, but another thing that we've talked about as of recent is the lenses you look through become the filters you live through, right? And so it's plausible that if you don't settle that, right? If you don't get to that place where maybe you grieve it, maybe you recognize that it's something that maybe Jesus really didn't create you for in the first place. Maybe it's an idol that you have to lay down to die to yourself over this thing. If you don't, then the compound interest of the lack of dealing with that can lead to other things that become even more of a fall in your world.
100%.
Right?
And here's something that I, it's funny, you and I had so many conversations when I first knew you, and you were going through some trauma, and that I look back on all that, just even right now thinking about it, stuff that we talked about then has proven true, for me. But one of the things is this: I really believe that trauma, and I'm just going to use that word to mean anything that you want it to mean. All right. That there are really only two responses, generally speaking, to trauma. And one is really healthy and one is really not. And one is, it hits you and you say, I will never let that happen to me again, and I'll do what it takes to make sure that I don't. And you're angry, okay? And so all your responses are defensive, reactionary, protective, angry. So now you close off your life to people. Now you're mad at other people whenever they're going through it. Why? I got through it, You want to talk about the most graceless thing that Christians can ever do is say, that happened to me and I'm fine. It's terrible. Please don't do that, okay? The right response is that it happens to you and it humbles you and you say, oh, this is why people sometimes have these struggles. This is why they hurt. This is why some of my friends just can't seem to whatever, And again, there's nuance in there. We don't have accountability and stuff, right? But I'm saying when something happens to you, and you, all you can think to do is judge others or protect yourself, that's the enemy at work trying to keep you from dealing with the death of the life that you thought you would have, right? What the Lord wants you to do is He wants that to create empathy and kindness in you, right? I don't know why, but but it's fine.
Do you need this?
Oh, it'll be all right. Maybe, yeah. So, yeah, great. All right. So, and that's what it did to me. Is honestly, like, I had spent years looking at people's struggles and kind of judging them, and this thing broke me so much that it just created new empathy, almost annoying levels of empathy in me. And you will see this in people if you start to look. You will see trauma in this friend. Whew, they're really mad. They're really mad at the world. They're really mad at God. They're really mad at anyone else who's suffering. And you will see that person went through something, and now they're ready just to love those who go through that. And you just want to be this. You want to be B. You want to be the second one, right? So anyway, we at the time this was all going on, I was still living here in Texas, and we were part of this small church I was telling you about. And I was living life with this very young elder we had this really young elder. He was in his early 30s at our church, young family. He had 3 kids, and he got leukemia, and slowly just started to take his life. The leukemia started just to wither him down. And I remember we were he was in 24-hour care at one of the cancer center thing here, and people would go down and stay with him, and we'd go see his wife and try to help, whatever. And one night, our church did Lent. I don't know if you guys have ever done Lent, but Lent's just this season before Easter where you can fast from something. And so our church was doing Lent, and it was that time period, and we're at this young lady's house, this woman who's suffering from her husband's slowly dying of leukemia, and we're at her house, and it's Lent, and a few of us are over there just having a good time. I'm trying to encourage her, and we're sort of over in one side of the room talking about Lent and thinking, I bet she's not doing Lent. I mean, she's fasting from joy. She's fasting from her husband, But she hears us, and she's like, "Oh, I'm doing Lent." And we're like, "Oh, well, what are you fasting from?" And she said, and I don't know where you guys are on this particular issue, but she said, "I'm fasting from drinking alone." And I want you to let that just settle in just for a second. I drink alone so much just to get through my life, I should probably take a break from it. And we all just got really emotional. She's kind of laughing as she's saying it, And I remember thinking, Lord, I know that you made me so you get my emotions. And I know that Jesus suffered on the cross, so he gets pain. But do you actually relate to, I got to drink alone just to make it through this thing? Do you actually relate to, I'm so angry I could just kick something? Could you actually relate to, I'm so afraid of like being around people, just the weight of it? You know, does he get that kind of, at least the temptation to those things? And so I just went on this kind of journey to find out, you know, do our faith heroes, including Jesus, do they deal with these things, right? And so I just started diving around. Okay, so I'm going to quickly tell you these, and there's lots of stories that proved it to be true, but I was focused on the Jesus stuff, and I want to tell you these three quick stories. So first one is John chapter 11. You guys know the story of Lazarus. Him and Mary and Martha are siblings. They're good friends of Jesus, and Lazarus gets very sick. Jesus is away somewhere. Mary and Martha send for him. It's a really weird story that I'll let John exegete, where Jesus says, where it says Jesus loved Lazarus and Mary and Martha very much, so he waited. Don't get it. It doesn't matter. We'll talk about it later. But he waits. Then he finally comes back. Lazarus has been dead for a few days. And Martha runs out. Where were you? I'll paraphrase. You have superpowers. You could raise him from his sickness. Why were you here? Jesus says back to her, don't you know he's going to rise again? She thinks he means later, when we're all going to rise again. She's like, sure, we're all going to rise again. He says the closest thing that he ever says, in my opinion, to hold my beer. And he says,
Wait, did everybody just pick that? Because that's funny stuff.
And the resurrection and the life. You know, I am. I'm that thing that you're talking about. I am a living example of rising again. That's me. I am that. I don't just do that. I am that. I'm walking around being resurrection. Watch this. He goes to the tomb, and here's where it gets really crazy. He's about to do something amazing. He's going to bring someone who's dead for many days back to life in seconds. That's going to happen. And what does he do? Favorite youth group memorization verse.
John 11:35.
And it says?
Jesus wept.
Yeah, he wept. Why does he cry right there? Think about this. Why does he cry right there? Something awesome is going to happen. Why is that sad? Because death is so awful, and no one knows better than the Lord, that it deserves our grief, even momentarily. So, John, I know you're struggling.
Even when you know the other side of it.
That's right. It's going to get better, John. What are you sad about? It's going to get better. No. Leave them alone for a minute and let them grieve. Let them rightly grieve. And Jesus models that. And I've never seen anything more human and more wonderful in my Savior, probably than that moment of just crying. And then he brings him back, That part of the story gets all the credit. But man, I could think about my Jesus crying about it. And anyway, the other two stories I'll tell briefly is one is he goes in the temple and he gets so angry at the way the temple's being used, he knocks all this stuff over and probably makes his friends nervous. He causes a scene. Any one of us would be like, Jesus, hey, chill, He knocks over these things. He makes a whip, it says. It gets really crazy, right? And then finally, in the garden, he's praying. And this is a really wacky theological conundrum because he's like God, praying to God about God doing something. And it's just really wacky. So I'm not going to try to get into that. But he's praying and he gets so worked up in some way that out of his pores, he starts bleeding. Some kind of medical, crazy thing. And those three stories, I thought about my friend who could not stop drinking alone. And I just thought, yes, Jesus doesn't just get me because he made me. He doesn't just get me because of the cross. He actually modeled extreme, uncomfortable, inappropriate responses. Inappropriate to us, right? To society. He actually publicly, and they wrote it down, modeled things that would have made everybody feel awkward because he didn't keep it together like we might want him to. So, I read a song about this. And what I want to convey here is that the people around you are going to sometimes lose it. And we just got to, by the grace of God, love them through it. Help them. You're going to lose it. Lean in. You know, don't be ashamed of that stuff. Because the Lord not only understands it, he actually did some uncomfortable, awkward, socially strange things. This is called good company. Your sadness was a sin. Jesus never would have cried. But that's exactly what he did when his good friend Lazarus died. And he knew that he could raise him up. And still the Lord was sad enough to grieve. If heartache was a crime, consider Jesus in the garden when he knew it was his time. And there was no better option, and he had to take that cup, and it stressed him out so much it made him bleed. If you've ever been so overwhelmed that you can barely breathe, my friend, you're in good company. If anger is so wrong, how about Jesus in the temple? It doesn't sound like he was calm when he was knocking over tables, and we know his heart was perfect, so there must have been some purpose for it all. If you've ever gotten mad at all the brokenness you see, my friend, you're in good company. In the darkness, you are not alone. There is a presence that will not let you go. Every tear that you have cried, every trial that you have known, he's known it too. In the darkness, you are not alone. There is a presence that will not let you go. Every tear that you have cried, every trial that you have known, he's known it too. So if defending your own honor and fighting for your rights are really so important, how come Jesus gave his life to pay for our salvation? He let a bunch of fools portray him as a criminal. If you've ever been humiliated, misunderstood, ridiculed, and hated, if you've ever gone through hell, faced the devil no one else could even see, my friend, you're in good company. You're in good company. In the darkness, you are not alone. There is a presence that will not let you go. Every tear that you have cried, every trial you have known, he's known it too.
It's good.
And I know this is the culture that you guys are trying to create here, but we are to be that company to each other, you know. We are, like I said earlier, that body of Christ thing is that we are sharing our faith, whatever amount we have to bring.
Most people would hear that and think, oh, you're evangelizing, but what you're really talking about is living in community authentically,
yeah,
and allowing, sometimes giving permission to be authentic, good, bad,
Yeah.
feeling strong with the Lord, feeling weak,
Right.
and leaning into people when you are feeling weak.
And that's why one of the great lies about church attendance is, they don't need me there today, so why would I go? And I do think there are some church cultures that certainly encourage that mindset, accidentally at least.
Not here. Just fine. Go ahead.
No, but that there is some of that. The people on stage are the ones that matter. But here's the thing: you being here is you are bringing whatever level of faith you have, and that is a ministry to those with differing levels of faith than you have. Yeah. Right? If you bring less, you're allowing them to be reminded of pain and hurt, and allowing them to minister. If you're bringing more, you're there to share that with those who need it. So the last thing that I will kind of share before I share this final song is that I told you that my primary kind of emotion I felt in my depression was shame. Why aren't you better? Why can't you get this right? What's wrong with you? Everyone must think Ross is messed up. It's kind of my constant thing. But the other emotion that I couldn't really shake was fear. And it was the fear that I wouldn't get better. It was the fear this was going to just be the way that I was. And I haven't been as depressed as I was then in several years, but occasionally I'll have little moments where I think it's coming on. And if you've dealt with this stuff like anxiety, you sort of know there's a physical kind of manifestation that you can feel. And when I feel little hints of it, I'll get so scared. I'll get legit scared, because I'll think, here it comes, and I feel powerless by it,
You were dealing with a lot, though, and I don't want to forget what you were dealing with as we're talking about, processing, basically. Right. But you had a lot going on.
Yeah.
It was a tragic accident.
Yeah.
You talked about your brother and the family situation.
Yeah. No, our family went from me and my wife and kids, so there's 6 of us, my brother and his wife and kids, there's 5 of them, my mom and my dad, and in about a 3-month period of time, that went to half, because my brother's marriage situation got really nasty, and he lost touch with mostly touch with his entire family, and my dad was gone, and so
you're processing, trying to help your mom process while you're living
right
away.
And I respectfully, she passed away about a year and a half ago, but respectfully, my mom handled trauma that first way that I told you guys. Yeah. She got angry, she got bitter, she got defensive, she got reactive, she struggled not to be more judgy of other people. Hey, I got through it. I have a hard time. Why can't you guys all be okay? So there was a lot. There was a storm there. Yes. No, you're exactly right. So I was really afraid that I wouldn't get better. And here's the weird thing about the Bible's approach to fear, in my opinion, is that it says a lot. Don't be afraid, but I don't see a lot of stories where someone deals with a fearful person and helps them. And that's not a flaw in the Bible. It's probably there. I didn't see a lot of all right, when someone's afraid, what do you do? And there's just not a lot of here's how you help someone in fear. There's always believe, don't, it's just don't fear, You're thinking, well, thanks, I'm still afraid. And I think for me, what I woke up to and what I'm still waking up to is not so much that I won't fear. It's that I have a infinitely more fearful presence on my side. And I don't mean that, I want to be careful here. I don't think you should be afraid of God. I'm saying everything else out there that wants God's spot in my heart ought to be afraid of God.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Everything out there trying to destroy me fears the Lord. Yeah. And not the way the Bible says fear the Lord. They are afraid of the Lord. And so as I was working through this bit, I was kind of starting to come out of the depression, and I was thinking, I've written all these songs about this stuff, but I never had really said depression in the songs. I never really said anxiety. I never really certainly hadn't said anything about counseling or medication, which were 2 things I needed. And I'm not going to get into a lot of that, but I did lots of counseling. I took some meds. For me, that was part of my journey. But I never talked about that stuff, because that's next level honesty, especially in the church. And so I kind of had this, John knows this about me, but I right or wrong tend to process my struggles just in the song, and then maybe a month later be like, why did I do that? That was a terrible idea. No, but I always joke that those testimonies that we talk about, that It's always the person gets up and says, hey, I used to do these bad things and now I don't do those things anymore, and that's why I'm up here, because Jesus is good. And that's testimony. You're not supposed to get up and be like, yeah, so I'm a kleptomaniac, and you guys should probably check your cars. My partner's out in the parking lot right now. I'm still struggling with it. Okay, I love Jesus. He's great, but I'm a kleptomaniac and I want to steal stuff. And if I bump you in the hallway, I got your wallet. It's over. That's not how it happens, right? It's so I didn't want to get up and be like, I'm still depressed right now. Earlier today, I took a pill. I will probably call my counselor after this or whatever. That's not the way you want to do it, right? But I just thought I gotta make this. I gotta pull the veil back here. This is crazy that we're acting like we're all fine. So I was in the middle of reading Psalm 23, and I'll close with this. But I was in the middle of reading Psalm 23, and everybody, all the Christians know the Psalm 23. But there's this one thing, and it's kind of like that Lazarus. So he waited. I never quite know what to do with this, But there's a one thing that toward the beginning of Psalm 23, and it says this: "The Lord's my shepherd; so I shall not want." And then it says, "He makes me lie down." Does yours say that? Yeah, he makes me lie down in green pastures. And there's a lot of translations that for that line, and almost all of them say makes me. I kept looking for, he gently invites me. He makes a pillow with grass and leaves and then says, I think it would be nice if you did that. It always says makes me, and I just wasn't quite sure what to do with makes me because it just sounded kind of mean. And I just realized at some point, he makes me because I wouldn't if he didn't make me. I've got other ideas for how to fix this. I can figure this out. Yeah. I'll systematize this, or I'll medicate it. And he makes me because he says, "Hey, you need to lie down. I've got this." This is what the Sabbath is, guys. I hate the Sabbath. Just to be honest, I really hate it. But that's what it is. I've got this. Take a day. Don't do stuff. I've got this. So he makes me. And so once I realized what that was, I kind of just was like, I think I get the whole passage differently now, because this is a very deadly, serious shepherd who is really, really intent on me getting this right. So he leads me by some quiet waters, and he's like, you hear that sound, that quietness? That's peace. I can get you peace. That's the kind of peace that I give. And then it says he restores my soul. He guides me to the righteousness for his name's sake. He's on this process of restoring me, making me better, taking me on good paths, which include the valley of the shadow of death. Is that what next? Yeah. So how about this? There's a valley somewhere in this Psalm story that is, death is so big that it's casting a shadow over the whole valley, and the valley's dark because of how big death is. Remember Jesus knew that. That's why he cried at the grave with Lazarus, because he knew that there was a valley that was utterly consumed by this darkness of death, right? But even though I'm going through that, I'm not going to, no, go back real quick. Sorry. I'm not going to fear evil, for you are with me, your rod and staff that comfort me. This is probably the same rod he used to make me lie down, is kind of my theory. So anyway, it says, keep going. Your staff that comforts me, you prepare a table for me. This is my favorite part of the whole thing. Imagine these walls are glass, all on the outside, and we send out a message to everyone that hates you and everyone that wants you to fail and everyone that's ever doubted you, and say, come to a party for this person. Everyone's never liked John. Imagine that. There's probably no one, but if there was someone who didn't like John, we'd invite all of them, and we'd have a party for John in front of them. That's what this is. Makes a table in front of the people that hate you and says, watch this. I'm going to celebrate this guy you hate. Isn't that awesome? It's so swaggery, And he anoints my head with oil. That's what they did for kings and queens. That's an honoring royalty. My cup overflows. He's just pouring drinks. He just keeps the drinks coming, right? And that's the kind of goodness and mercy or loving kindness that will follow me all the days of my life. That's what it's like to be in the house of the Lord forever. And that doesn't cure my depression. It doesn't end my anxiety. But as I'm deeply afraid, and I feel like my whole life is just walking through this deadly valley that's so dark, I just hope God swings a stick at whatever comes at me. Knowing this is true, I found deep comfort as I worked through those things. And again, I should have said in the beginning, the punchline is I don't have a cure for you. I will say this: there is a bigger story, and it looks like what we just read. That's right. And it looks like this. And if you can keep yourself coming back to the bigger story, that will at least, I think, be a balm to your soul, you know. And I'll just finally say, then I'll sing for you. The Lord has not quit on you. Do not quit on him. So I wanted to write something to kind of say all of that, and my goal was to use all the words, use all the words I hadn't used yet, all the words I'd been afraid to use. This is called Things I'm Afraid of. When I am shaking and my heart's pounding, you always take me, make me lie down in peaceful fields where I can clear my head. 'Cause I get so overcome with anxiety, like there's an enemy living inside of me, like a mocker yelling out, telling lies to me. And I don't feel brave, but I don't have to be, 'cause I walk through the valley of shadows. It scared me half to death, but you're with me everywhere I go. So I don't give up yet. My fear would surely kill me if I didn't know the truth. The things that I'm afraid of are afraid of you. My emotions turn against me, not faith nor reason could convince me that you have patience left to fight for me. When my depression is affecting every ounce of me, I can get the medication and the counseling, still I can hear the fear calling out to me. And I don't feel brave, but I don't have to be, 'cause I walk through the valley of shadows. It scared me half to death, but you're with me everywhere I go. So I don't give up yet. My fear would surely kill me if I didn't know the truth. The things that I'm afraid of are afraid of you. You prepare a table for me right in front of my worst enemies, and you're as calm and relaxed as can be. There's no place where the demons won't find me, but just wait till they see who's standing behind me. I walk through the valley of shadows. It scared me half to death, but you're with me everywhere I go. And so I don't give up yet. My fear would surely kill me if I didn't know the truth. The things that I'm afraid of are afraid of you. The things that I'm afraid of are afraid of you.
Good stuff. Hey, would you thank Ross? Would you honor him? Come on. Briefly before we go, just want to kind of go into a posture of prayer just for a minute, because here's the truth of the matter. Sometimes we're not okay. You know, as we close out this series, I don't want us to just allow it to pass by as just another chapter in the life of 2023, in the life of, you know, oh, we're moving on to the next thing to talk about now. I want us to pause and know this. At any given moment, someone is walking into the valley, right? At any given moment. We have no idea. You know, one of the things that drives, I think that drives the heart of this house, honestly, one thing that drives us, and I hope that it drives you, and if not, I'm going to pray right now that it begins to, is that we never know who is going to barely shuffle into this room saying, I'm going to give you one last chance, God. You never know. Any given Sunday, any given small group, any given meeting, someone looking at you, hoping that you'll catch their eye and engage them. We never know. Many might say, well, why work so hard and put all this, do all the things you're doing. Everything that we're doing as a church, I can tell you this, is the byproduct of we never know who God is going to bring into the house, who is literally saying, I'm going to give you one more chance, Jesus. And you may be here today. Someone's always stepping into the valley. And I don't know if you caught this, but a lot of the songs that we sang this morning, and even the song that we're about to sing, as we respond just for a moment to the Lord, is really about telling my soul. They call it a sacrifice of praise for a reason. Sometimes you're just not feeling it, if I'm being honest. Sometimes the pain is at an all-time level, and it's not just necessarily physical. It's so emotional, it's so mental that it's playing itself out physically as well. But it's just so high that all you can do is muster up maybe a sacrifice of praise. And you know what? I think that's, the moment that you open your heart, you open your hands, you open your mouth, and you even begin to engage that, God rushes right in. I feel y'all were here years back. We got a friend named Tully and Shavijan who is here speaking. He's been through a hard go in his life, made some really horrible choices. Self-admittedly, he would say made some horrible choices. And the one thing he said that I think stuck with so many people that day is that God's office is always at the end of your rope. So this morning, I just want to give us an opportunity. If you would just close your eyes, and maybe you're here, and just like I told you in the beginning, I'm sorry we can't just put a bow on the box for you on this series. We can't wrap it up neatly and package it in a pretty way. I think that's kind of what Ross was talking about, sharing faith. Sometimes it's the exercising of faith that's going to walk you through something. You may necessarily never get over something. You may constantly limp. We see scriptural precedent of that, where there was a thorn in the flesh. There was always a limp. But still the soul could say, God, you're right. God, you're good. I can tell you, Ross spoke to when he and I first started really becoming friends. I was walking through my own dark night. The only thing that I could recite over and over and over, sometimes over 100 times a day, is to remind my soul, listen to me please, I would remind my soul, as horrible as this moment that I'm walking through is, God is good, God is right, God is good. My suffering, He's not just pointing me out here. This is the fruit of the fall, the origin because of original sin. But God is so good that He saw through time and space to my need, even still, all the way back in Genesis 3. He saw through time and space to your need, and He gave us a way through Jesus to not just find comfort, but to find hope. Amen? So I don't know where you are this morning, but maybe we're just going to tell our soul. The Bible says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your gentle spirit be known. The Lord is near. The Lord is near. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything pray. It's by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Pour out your heart. Let your requests be made known to God. He's listening. He's near. And when we begin to engage God in this way, maybe we're at the end of our rope, but that's where we'll find Him. Maybe it's a sacrifice of praise to say, God, I'm going to rejoice no matter. When we do that, the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will begin to guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. So if you're here this morning and you just need someone to minister to you, just for a minute as the team sings, we're going to have prayer team over to your right against that black curtain. We've got some response tables. Maybe you just like to come to the table of the Lord. We have Eucharist supplies, communion, Lord's Supper supplies on each response table. Maybe you'd like to come to the altar and just get alone with the Lord. Whatever you need to do, just for a minute. Can we just sit into this for just a second? So Holy Spirit, would you move on our hearts like only you can and minister us right now? We pray.
Hey, thank you so much for checking us out online today. If you need to make a decision about the next steps in your faith journey with Jesus, text CONNECT to 43,000. And if you took the first step in your faith journey today by saying yes to Jesus, we want to know about it, and we want to walk with you. So text Jesus to 43,000. There you will find some resources and a message from Pastor John. There are so many ways to connect to Declaration. Check out declaration.org to find out more about who we are. Before we go, let's say our declaration together. Because of what the gospel has done in and to us, our lives exist to help people encounter and follow Jesus. We will devote ourselves to His Word, His presence, and His people. We desire authenticity, intimacy, a heart of service, and to see His kingdom come. We are for Jesus and for people. Hey, have a great week. We're so glad you joined us. Bye for now.